In the last couple of videos, we've been talking about the Protestant Reformation, but you didn't think all the religious change in Europe wasn't going to cause Christians to start killing each other in the name of Jesus, did you? Don't be crazy. So if you're ready to get them brain cows milked, then let's talk about Europe's wars of religion. I reckon we ought to start in France. So in the first half of the 1500s, most of the French people were Catholic, but by the 1560s, Protestantism had spread into France. Thanks, printing press. And it gained a pretty strong foothold. Now, the particular flavor of Protestantism that had taken root in France was Calvinism, and French Calvinists were known as Huguenots. Now, this wouldn't have posed much of a problem, except that something like half of the French nobility were now Huguenot, and they started agitating for recognition and rights within France, but the Catholic majority were in no mood to do so. And that is when Charles IX took the throne, and he was a wee lad coming in at 11 years old. So his mother, Catherine de' Medici, essentially ruled in his place until he came of age. Now, Catherine was very Catholic, and she was pretty saucy about these French noble Huguenots demanding recognition and rights. So she decided that she wanted to purge France of this cranky, non-conforming nobility, not least because they were a threat to her power. And so the French Wars of Religion began in 1562 with an event known as the Massacre of VASSY. Essentially, a group of Huguenots were at a worship service, just minding their own business and singing to Jesus, when a duke of the Catholic Guise family ordered them all killed. Now, the Huguenots were not a strong enough force to take over France at this point, but they fought defensively for 10 years and held their own until the next massacre orchestrated by Catherine de' Medici, namely the St. Bartholomew'S Day massacre. At this point, it's 1572, and all the religious tensions seemed to be solved in the marriage of the Catholic sister of Charles IX and the Calvinist Henry of Navarre. Now, because Henry was the kind of de facto leader of the Huguenots, many of them came to Paris for the wedding. Big mistake! The Guise family, who, if you will remember, were responsible for the Huguenot massacre at Vassy, convinced Catherine de' Medici that all these filthy Calvinists were a threat to Catholic France. And so, under her influence, Charles IX went ahead and ordered the mass killing of these Huguenots. And that unleashed a 3-day killing spree in which Catholics slaughtered thousands of Huguenots throughout Paris. Now, Henry of Navarre, the champion of the Huguenots, their leader, went ahead and saved his own life by promising to convert to Catholicism. I admire your cowardice, Henry. But don't worry, he showed true moral fortitude by converting back to Calvinism just in time for the next phase of France's Wars of Religion, the War of the Three Henrys. Now, class, how many Henrys do you think were involved in this war? 3, that is correct. So as the religious and political tension continued to build, 3 different Henrys vied for the throne of France. By 1574, Henry III was on the throne, having succeeded Charles IX. But apparently he was not Catholic enough for Henry of Guise, who was the leader of the ultra-Catholic Holy League and wanted to assume the throne himself. So Henry of Guise, with the help of the Spanish throne, took the French throne by force, relegating Henry III to his chief minister. As a result of that, Henry III had Henry of Guise assassinated and then joined Henry of Navarre to rid Paris of the Holy League. And he did it, but in 1589, a disgruntled monk assassinated Henry III, and that left Henry of Navarre to take the throne. Now remember, he had converted back to Calvinism, but he understood that such an arrangement would be none too popular, and so he went ahead and converted back to Catholicism. Man doesn't know principles. Regardless, by the time of his ascension in 1594 as Henry IV, the French Wars of Religion had come to an end. One of Henry IV's major achievements was the move towards religious toleration in France, embodied in the Edict of Nantes in 1598. It officially established France as a Catholic state, but also provided the Huguenots freedom to worship without the fear that they would be massacred or otherwise harassed. But, my dear pupils, religious wars were not just occurring in France. Spain was a major player too. Now, Spain was ruled by the Habsburgs, who have been in power across Europe for a very long time, and Spain was as Catholic can be. Now, by the time Philip II rose to power in 1556, Spain was having some Ottoman Empire troubles. In 1453, the Ottomans had completed their conquest of the Byzantine Empire by capturing its crown jewel, Constantinople. And with that victory, the Ottomans decided that the next best thing to do would be to expand into Central and Eastern Europe. So Spain, with the help of the King of Poland and the Duke of Lorraine, repelled the Ottoman forces, and that put the kibosh on the Ottoman expansion into Europe. Now, Philip II was pretty upset about the fracturing of Christianity across Europe, and it's hard to overestimate just how much he hated Protestants. He decided that he wanted to restore Catholic unity across Europe, and he set his sights on the Netherlands and England to rid them of their filthy Protestant influence. In the Netherlands, there was a growing Calvinist contingent, especially in the middle class. Now, Philip's dad, Charles V, was relatively tolerant of this group, and he let them do their thing. But not Philip. When Dutch Calvinists began destroying Catholic religious images, and the word for that is iconoclasm, Philip II unleashed targeted persecution on them. So William of Orange rose to the leadership of the Dutch Calvinists, and in 1581, they declared themselves independent of Spanish rule. Now, Spain also had England problems. By this point, Elizabeth I was on the throne, and she was all about the Protestantism. She supported the Dutch Protestant rebellion that I just mentioned, and to that, Philip of Spain said, "No, you didn't." So because of that, and because England had been messing with Spain's merchant ships, Philip sent the Spanish Armada to invade England and teach them a lesson. But as it turns out, the English Navy gave the Spanish Armada a smackdown, and that victory, combined with the Dutch March Protestant Rebellion meant that Protestantism was gaining a foothold in Europe. Now, the last religious war you need to know might be the most significant, and it was called the 30 Years' War, and it occurred in the Holy Roman Empire. Now, in order to understand this, you have to understand the Peace of Augsburg of 1555, which offered some degree of religious toleration in the Holy Roman Empire. This document decreed that the princes of the many territories of the Holy Roman Empire could decide whether their subjects would be Catholic or Protestant. But, and here's the problem, when I say Protestant, I mean Lutheran. Now, as you no doubt know by now, Calvinism and Lutheranism were separate but related strains of Protestantism. And Calvinism was exerting some major influence in the Holy Roman Empire. But since the Peace of Augsburg had only two options, Catholic or Lutheran, in the Holy Roman Empire, the Calvinists were like, yeah, that ain't gonna work. So when Catholic Ferdinand became king in the Calvist territory of Bohemia, things started getting saucy. As Ferdinand started a program of re-Catholicizing Bohemia, the Calvinist nobility were like, nuh-uh. And to emphasize their point, the nobility threw two of Ferdinand's messengers out a window in an event known as the Defenestration of Prague, defenestration being a fancy word for throwing someone out a window. Now, these officials fell something like 70 feet and survived. Catholics said they survived because of the intercession of the Virgin Mary. Protestants pointed out that their fall was broken by a giant pile of manure. Now, whether it was Mary's intercession or the poo, I'm not qualified to answer, but this event set off the 30 Years' War. Now, there are 4 phases of this war you need to know, and that can be confusing, but the big idea to notice here is that as we go through the phases, like as we move from phase 1 to phase 4, the motivations for fighting go from being primarily religious to primarily political. So phase 1, the Bohemian phase. In this phase, the Holy Roman Emperor and Catholic Ferdinand II defeated Protestant forces led by Frederick I at the Battle of White Mountain. The result of this phase is that the Catholics gained the upper hand and re-established Catholicism across many places in the Holy Roman Empire. Then came phase 2, namely the Danish phase. In this phase, King Christian IV of Denmark, that's the Danish part, he took up the Protestant cause, not least because he was involved in an anti-Catholic, anti-Habsburg alliance with England. You can see here the political motive starting to bleed in. Now, despite this help on the Protestant side, the Catholics still won this phase of the war. And then came phase 3, the Swedish phase. In this phase, the war begins to extend beyond the borders of the Holy Roman Empire, and King Gustavus Adolphus of Sweden organizes the Protestant cause and armies and scores a major victory for the Protestants. Now, one reason the Protestants fared so well is because Gustavus Adolphus was a military genius. But the other reason is because the Protestants received no small financial help from France. Wait a minute, if I remember correctly from the beginning of this video, France was Catholic, so what in the fresh heck are they doing financing the Protestant struggle against the Catholics? Well, this is the major turning point where we can see that the religious character of the war has clearly taken a backseat to political concern. You see, the only thing the Catholic French leadership hated more than Protestants was the Habsburgs, and so they didn't care that the Protestants were fighting against them, they just wanted to weaken the Habsburg influence. Anyway, the 4th and final phase of the war was the French phase, and here France entered into the war on the side of the Protestants and fought mainly with Spain to assure that the Habsburgs would not rebound from their defeats. And in 1648, the 30 Years' War finally came to an end with the signing of the Peace of Westphalia, and there are a couple of things you need to know about this major turning point in European history. First, it essentially marked the end of the religious wars of Europe. Second, it amended the Peace of Augsburg to include Calvinism as a legitimate faith. Third, with that further splintering of Protestantism, it officially marked the end of the medieval idea of a universal Christendom. And fourth, it kept the Holy Roman Empire weak and the rulers of individual states strong, and in that way it hastened the decline of the Holy Roman Empire. Now, I know that was a lot, but if you need more help with Unit 2, click here for the entire playlist. Also, if you want to follow along note guides for all my topic videos, then click right here and all your dreams will come true. Alright, I'll catch you on the flip-flop. Heimler out.